Right then, hello, and a slightly nervous welcome. Because tonight we're wading into the murky, often baffling and occasionally infuriating waters of political finance. Specifically, welcome to our deep dive into the financial interests of New Zealand's Parliament members in 2025. Yes, we're going to be sifting through declarations, peering behind the jargon, and asking the kind of questions that might make a politician suddenly remember a very important, entirely unrelated meeting. Think of it as an archaeological dig, but instead of ancient pottery, we're looking for potentially dodgy shareholdings and suspiciously timed property acquisitions. Now, why are we doing this? Is it because we enjoy giving ourselves a migraine plowing through financial disclosures? Partly, but mainly it's because the people making decisions that affect every single Kiwi, from the price of your flat white to the future of, well, everything, have private financial lives. And sometimes, just sometimes, those private interests can look a bit with their public duties. We'll explore if any of these interests could be seen as conflicting and why some of these costs might be unnecessary. It's about transparency, accountability, and ensuring our MPs are serving the public, not their stock portfolios or their suspiciously well-connected second cousins consultancy firm. So grab a cup of tea or something stronger if you're already anticipating the levels of, "Are you kidding me?" we might reach. We're going to be looking at who owns what, who owes whom, and whether any of it smells faintly of week old fish left in a ministerial limo. This isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about the fundamental trust we place in our elected officials. And let's be honest, trust, like a politician's promise, can be a very fragile thing indeed. Let's get into it. First up, we have Steve Abel, a List MP from the Green Party. Now, the Greens, as we know, are typically associated with environmentalism, social justice, and a general vibe of we'd rather be composting. So, when we look at Mr. Abel's declared interests, specifically his real property, one naturally assumes it's a charmingly rustic, off-grid tiny home powered by nothing but righteous indignation and artisanal solar panels. Or perhaps a share in a collectively owned eco-village where decisions are made by consensus and the loudest voice belongs to a particularly opinionated chicken named Brenda. It's important to know the scale and nature of this real property. Is it a single family home, or does it venture into the territory of investment properties? Because you see, owning multiple properties while advocating for housing affordability can create a rather dissonant chord, can't it? Then there are his retirement schemes, plural, schemes, which in itself sounds a little bit like something a cartoon villain would concoct. My retirement schemes are almost complete, snively, but in all seriousness, where are these funds invested? Are they squeaky, clean, ethically sourced, fossil fuel divested portfolios that align perfectly with Green Party principles? Or, and this is where it gets interesting, could there be hidden deep within a fund of funds a cheeky little investment in something that might make a recycling bin weep? The potential for conflict here, however remote, arises if these schemes benefit from, say, government incentives or regulatory changes that Mr. Abel as an MP might vote on or influence. Transparency on the underlying assets of these schemes is absolutely paramount. And finally, we have debts owed. Now, debt is a part of life for many. It could be a mortgage on that aforementioned, hopefully eco-friendly abode. Or it could be something else. The key questions are: to whom are these debts owed and under what terms? Is it a standard bank loan, or is it a loan from a private individual or entity that might have, shall we say, imagine hypothetically owing a significant sum to a company that's heavily involved in an industry the Greens are trying to regulate more stringently. That would be like a vegan owing money to a butcher, incredibly awkward and potentially compromising. The source and conditions of these debts are crucial for understanding any potential leverage or undue influence. The concern, as always, isn't necessarily that Mr. Abel is doing anything untoward. It's that the for conflict or the of conflict can be just as damaging to public trust. If his property portfolio, for instance, benefits significantly from lax tenancy laws that his party officially opposes, that's a problem. Or if his retirement funds are inadvertently propping up industries the Greens are campaigning against, that's a significant ethical tangle. We need clarity, not just a vague listing, to ensure that his financial decisions aren't subtly or not so subtly colouring his political ones. It's about ensuring that when he champions a green policy, it's driven by conviction, not by a desire to see his sustainably forested investment property appreciate in value. Ultimately, For an MP from a party built on principles of environmental and social responsibility, the bar for financial transparency should arguably be even higher. Every asset, every investment, every debt should be able to withstand the harsh glare of public scrutiny and align with the very values they espouse. If there are discrepancies or even the appearance of them, it doesn't just undermine Mr. Abel. It risks tarnishing the credibility of the causes he represents. And that, frankly, would be a crying shame, much like finding out your organic kale smoothie was secretly sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. The horror. Next, we turn our attention to the Honourable Ginny Anderson, a list MP for the Labour Party. Labour, the party of the worker, the champion of social safety nets, and the folks who, one assumes, have a deep and abiding empathy for those navigating the complexities of the modern economy. So when we look at Miss Anderson's declared interests, specifically her real property, we're looking for something that reflects these values, perhaps a modest family home in a regular Kiwi suburb, a testament to the aspiration of home ownership that Labour often speaks about. Or maybe it's a share in a co-housing project fostering community spirit. The critical aspect here is whether this real property aligns with the party's stance on housing accessibility and affordability, or if it hints at a portfolio that might benefit from policies that could, inadvertently or otherwise, make things tougher for first home buyers. Then we have her retirement schemes. Again, plural, suggesting a degree of financial planning that many can only dream of. The question, as ever, is what exactly are these schemes invested in? Are they models of responsible investment, perhaps favouring companies with strong labour practices and a commitment to local economies? Or do they, through a series of complex financial instruments, find themselves linked to industries or practices that might raise an eyebrow or two at a Labour Party conference? For instance, if a retirement fund heavily invests in companies known for outsourcing jobs or engaging in precarious work practices, that would sit rather uncomfortably alongside Labour's traditional pro-worker stance. It's these potential contradictions we need to be aware of. And just like Mr. Abel, Miss Anderson has debts owed. This is a common declaration, but the devil, as they say, is in the details. Details which are often frustratingly absent from these public disclosures. Is it a standard mortgage from a high street bank, the kind that thousands of New Zealanders grapple with? Or are there other, less conventional lines of credit involved? The concern here is about potential leverage. If a significant debt is owed to an entity that has an interest in government policy, perhaps a large corporation or a financial institution with a specific lobbying agenda, it could, at the very least, create a perception of compromised independence. We need to know that her decision-making isn't being subtly swayed by the need to keep a creditor happy. The potential for conflict of interest for any MP, including Miss Anderson, often lies in the grey areas. For example, if she owns rental properties, how does that square with advocating for stronger tenant protections or rent controls, which her party might champion? Does her personal financial situation benefit from the status quo in a way that might temper her enthusiasm for reform? These aren't accusations. They are legitimate questions that arise when private financial interests intersect with public responsibilities. It's about ensuring that policy decisions are made for the collective good, not for personal financial gain, however indirect. Ultimately, for a Labour MP, the expectation is that their financial dealings reflect a commitment to fairness, equity, and the well-being of ordinary New Zealanders. Any significant deviation from this, or any financial arrangement that seems to prioritise personal enrichment over these principles, can be deeply problematic. Transparency isn't just about listing assets and debts. It's about providing enough context for the public to be assured that their representatives are truly working in their best interests, unencumbered by financial considerations that might pull them in a different direction. It's like finding out your favourite man of the people politician exclusively drinks champagne that costs more than your monthly rent. It just feels a bit off, doesn't it? All right, let's move on to Miles Anderson, representing the National Party for the Waitaki electorate. Now, national MPs, traditionally, are often associated with business acumen, rural interests, and a general fondness for things like economic growth and fiscal responsibility. Mr. Anderson's declarations are quite a lineup: company directorships, beneficial interests, real property, retirement schemes, and debts owed. That's quite the portfolio, suggesting a man with fingers in many, many pies. And when you have that many pies, there's always a risk some of the fillings might get mixed up, especially if some of those pies are, say, agricultural policy pie and personal agribusiness profit pie. First, those company directorships. This is a big one. Being a director means you have a legal responsibility to act in the best interests of that company. Being an MP means you have a responsibility to act in the best interests of your constituents and the country. What happens when those two interests don't align? Say, for instance, Mr. Anderson is a director of an agricultural company, and Parliament is debating new environmental regulations that could impact farming practices and, consequently, that company's bottom line. Where does his loyalty lie? This isn't a hypothetical stretch. It's a classic conflict of interest scenario that needs incredibly careful management and, frankly, full disclosure of what these companies actually. Then there are his beneficial interests. This is a wonderfully vague term that can cover a multitude of financial arrangements, often through trusts or other vehicles where someone else might legally own an asset, but the MP still reaps the rewards. This is where things can get particularly opaque. If Mr. Anderson has beneficial interests in, say, land development companies or businesses that rely heavily on government contracts, the potential for him to influence decisions that directly or indirectly enrich him is significant. We need to know what these interests are, not just that they exist. Is he benefiting from a family farm that might be impacted by water allocation policies? Or perhaps from a logistics company that would thrive with new infrastructure spending he votes for? His real property in Waitaki, a significant agricultural area, also warrants attention. Is this extensive farmland? Are there commercial properties? The nature of this property, especially in a rural electorate, could intersect with numerous policy areas: land use, water rights, agricultural subsidies, environmental regulations. If his personal wealth is heavily tied to the value and productivity of this land, how does that influence his stance on policies that might affect those very things? It's like being the referee in a game where your own team is playing and also you own the stadium and also you're selling the halftime pies. It's a bit much. And of course, the familiar duo of retirement schemes and debts owed. For someone with extensive business interests, these could be complex. Are the retirement schemes invested in sectors he might regulate or promote? Are the debts owed to financial institutions or private lenders who might also have dealings with the government or benefit from certain policy outcomes? For example, a large loan from an agricultural bank while he's shaping farming policy could certainly raise an eyebrow or two. It's about ensuring that these financial arrangements don't create unspoken obligations or incentives that could compromise his impartial judgment as an MP. The sheer breadth of Mr. Anderson's declared interests means the potential for such conflicts is multiplied. Transparency here isn't just a nicety, it's an absolute necessity to ensure his constituents know he's working for Waitaki, not just his own ledger. Chapter 4. Jamie Arbuckle, NZ First List. Companies, Properties and the Price of Influence. Now we have Jamie Arbuckle, a List MP for New Zealand First. NZ First, a party often positioning itself as a sensible handbrake, a champion of national sovereignty, and a voice for, shall we say, a particular segment of the populace that feels overlooked. Mr. Arbuckle comes to the table with declared companies, real property, retirement schemes and debts owed. That's a solid, if somewhat standard-looking set of interests for an MP with a business background, but as always, the intrigue lies beneath the surface. What kind of companies are we talking about here? Are they local businesses serving the community, or are they entities with more complex, perhaps even international dealings? Let's talk about these companies. The declaration of companies is a starting point, but it's like saying you own books. Are we talking about a dog-eared copy of The Cat in the Hat or a first edition of Ulysses? The nature of these companies is critical. If Mr. Arbuckle owns or has a significant stake in, companies that could benefit from government contracts, specific regulatory changes, or even shifts in foreign policy that NZ First might advocate for, then we are firmly in conflict of interest territory. For example, if he has a company involved in, say, primary industries, and NZ First is pushing for certain trade deals or subsidies, the public deserves to know the full extent of that connection. Then there's the real property. Where is it? What type is it? Is it a family home or a portfolio of investment properties? For a party that often speaks to the concerns of older New Zealanders and those in regional areas, the nature of these property holdings matters. If Mr. Arbuckle's property interests are heavily geared towards, for instance, commercial real estate that might benefit from specific zoning changes or infrastructure projects that NZ First could find itself negotiating as part of a coalition government, that's a connection worth exploring. It's about ensuring that policy decisions aren't being subtly nudged by the prospect of appreciating property values for those in power. The retirement schemes and debts owed follow familiar patterns of concern. Are his retirement funds invested in alignment with the nationalist and often socially conservative stances of his party, or are they chasing returns in global markets that might contradict those very positions? And who are the debts owed to? If they are to institutions or individuals with their own political or economic agendas, particularly ones that might seek favour from a party known for its role as a potential coalition partner, then the alarm bells should at least be gently ringing. The power dynamic in such a relationship, where an MP is indebted to a party with lobbying interests, is inherently problematic. The core issue for an NZ First MP like Mr. Arbuckle, given the party's often pivotal role in forming governments, is that any perceived financial entanglement can be magnified. When you're potentially the kingmaker, the scrutiny on your financial probity should be intense. Are his company interests, property holdings, and financial obligations entirely separate from the policy positions he champions and the negotiations his party undertakes? Or is there a risk, however small, that personal financial considerations could play a role when crucial decisions are being made behind closed doors? It's like being a judge in a baking competition where your own mother has entered her prize-winning pavlova. You might be impartial, but no one's going to believe you if she wins. Chapter 5, Carl Bates, National Wanganui, Business Acumen and the Public Purse. Next on our financial tour is Carl Bates, representing the National Party in Wanganui. Mr. Bates lists companies, beneficial interests, real property, retirement schemes and debts owed. This is another MP with a significant business footprint, and as we've seen, more business interests can mean more potential tripwires when it comes to public duty. The National Party often prides itself on bringing business sense to government, but it's crucial that this business sense serves the public interest, not just private business interests, especially those belonging to the MPs themselves. It's a fine line to walk, like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach while also balancing the national budget on your nose. Let's delve into Mr. Bates's companies. What sectors are these companies in? Are they local Wanganui businesses, or do they have a broader, perhaps national or even international scope? If these companies operate in fields that are heavily regulated or frequently interact with government, think construction, healthcare, technology or consultancy services, then the potential for conflict is immediately apparent. For instance, if Mr. Bates owns a consultancy firm, is there a risk that this firm might, down the line, seek or be perceived to unfairly gain government contracts, especially if he's in a position to influence such decisions or has colleagues who are? The beneficial interests add another layer of complexity. As we've discussed, these can be opaque. Is Mr. Bates benefiting from trusts that hold assets in sectors he might be developing policy for? For example, if a trust holds significant investments in the aged care sector and he's on a health select committee or involved in policy discussions around aged care funding, that's a glaring red flag. The public needs assurance that his policy positions are driven by the needs of Wanganui and the country, not by the performance of his hidden investment portfolio. It's like having a secret shareholder in your decision-making process. His real property interests also require scrutiny. Is it residential, commercial, or perhaps rural land, given Wanganui's diverse geographical makeup? If his property holdings are substantial and could be affected by zoning laws, infrastructure development, like roading projects, which are often a National Party focus, or other government initiatives, then his objectivity on these matters could be questioned. Imagine advocating for a new highway that just happens to run conveniently close to a parcel of land you beneficially own, significantly increasing its value. Coincidence? Perhaps. But it's a coincidence that deserves a very close look. Finally, the retirement schemes and debts owed. Are his retirement funds parked in aggressive growth funds that might invest in industries whose practices clash with broader public good, or are they more conservatively and ethically managed? And who are the creditors for his debts? If he owes significant amounts to financial institutions or private lenders who have their own lobbying efforts or interests in government policy, it creates a potential vulnerability. For an MP from a party that emphasizes fiscal prudence, ensuring their own financial affairs are transparent and free from undue influence is doubly important. It's about practicing what you preach, especially when the sermon is about responsible financial management. Chapter 6, Hon Andrew Bailey National Port Waikato, Directorships, Trusts and Coastal Concerns. We now turn to the Honourable Andrew Bailey, National MP for Port Waikato. Mr. Bailey's declarations are extensive company directorships, beneficial interests, including from trusts, real property, retirement schemes and debts owed. This is the financial profile of someone deeply enmeshed in the business world, which, while potentially bringing valuable experience, also significantly elevates the risk of conflicts. Port Waikato itself, with its coastal environment and proximity to Auckland, presents unique development and environmental pressures, making his financial ties particularly relevant. It's like being a lifeguard who also owns the local shark-attracting burger stand. Your priorities might get a bit muddled. The company directorships are an immediate point of focus. What are these companies? What do they do? Are they active in sectors like property development, resource management, or marine industries, all of which are highly pertinent to the Port Waikato electorate? If Mr. Bailey sits on the board of, say, a coastal development company while also having a say on environmental regulations or infrastructure projects affecting that coastline, the conflict is almost unavoidable. He would essentially be playing on both sides of the fence, a fence that might be precariously close to a rising waterline, metaphorically speaking. His beneficial interests, explicitly noted as including those from trusts, demand even closer examination. Trusts are notoriously effective vehicles for obscuring ownership and control. What assets do these trusts hold? Are they tied to land in Port Waikato that could be rezoned? Do they hold shares in companies that might tender for local or central government work? The lack of transparency around the specific assets within these trusts is a significant problem. It's like a magician saying, "I have something in this hat," but refusing to show you, while simultaneously asking you to vote on rabbit welfare legislation. It just doesn't inspire confidence. The real property owned by Mr. Bailey, especially any within or near his electorate, is also critical. Given Port Waikato's environmental sensitivities and development potential, his property interests could directly intersect with his responsibilities as an MP. For instance, if he owns significant coastal property, his stance on issues like coastal erosion management, marine reserves, or regulations on waterfront development could be perceived as being influenced by his personal financial stake. It's about ensuring that decisions are made for the long-term health of the community and environment, not to enhance the value of an MP's private holdings, and then the familiar refrain of retirement schemes and debts owed. With a complex financial background, Mr. Bailey's retirement investments could be spread across a wide array of sectors. Are any of these in industries that lobby heavily for deregulation or government support in areas he might influence? Similarly, are his debts to mainstream banks, or are there private lenders or financial institutions with specific interests in the policy landscape? For an MP representing an area like Port Waikato, where long-term planning and environmental stewardship are key, any financial entanglement that could compromise impartial decision-making is a serious concern. The public needs to be sure he's navigating for Port Waikato, not just for his portfolio. Let's look at Camilla Bellich, a Labour-list MP. Her declared interests include beneficial interests, including from a trust, real property, retirement schemes, and notably gifts. The inclusion of gifts always piques interest as it directly touches upon the potential for external influence, however innocently intended. For a Labour MP whose party platform often emphasises fairness and equal opportunity, ensuring that personal financial arrangements and acceptance of gifts don't create any perception of preferential treatment or compromised judgment is absolutely vital. It's like being a referee who keeps getting unsolicited fruit baskets from one of the team captains. Even if the fruit is lovely, it looks a bit fishy. The beneficial interests, particularly those stemming from a trust, raise the usual questions about transparency. What assets does this trust hold? Who are the other beneficiaries, if any? And who are the trustees making decisions? If the trust holds investments in sectors that are significantly impacted by government policy, for example, housing, healthcare or social services, all key areas for Labour, then Miss Bellich could be seen to benefit personally from decisions made by her colleagues or herself. We need to know if the trust is a simple family arrangement or something more complex with wider financial implications. Her real property interests also warrant a look. Is it a family home or are there investment properties in the mix? If she owns multiple properties, particularly rental properties, this could put her in a potentially awkward position when Labour discusses or implements policies related to housing affordability, rent controls or tenants' rights. It's the classic landlord-legislator conundrum. How do you advocate for policies that might negatively impact your own investment income? The public deserves to know that her policy positions are driven by broader social concerns, not by the desire to maximize rental yields. The declaration of gifts is particularly noteworthy. What kind of gifts are we talking about? Who are they from and what was their value? While MPs are allowed to accept gifts under certain rules, the nature and source of these gifts can be highly revealing. A bottle of wine from a constituent is one thing. A complimentary overseas trip from a corporation lobbying for a government contract is quite another. Transparency around gifts is crucial to ensure that there's no quid pro quo, no sense that an MP's favour or attention can be bought, even with something seemingly innocuous. It's about maintaining the integrity of the office. Finally, her retirement schemes. As with her colleagues, the question is where these funds are invested. Are they in ethical funds that align with Labour values, focusing on social responsibility and sustainable development? Or could they be passively invested in broader market funds that include shares in companies whose practices might be at odds with Labour's policy objectives, such as those with poor Labour records or significant environmental impacts? For an MP in a party that champions social justice, ensuring that their long-term financial security isn't built on investments that contradict those principles is an important ethical consideration. It's about consistency and walking the talk, even in the fine print of a pension plan. Next up is Glenn Bennett, another Labour list MP. His declared interests are real property, retirement schemes and debts owed. This is a relatively concise list compared to some of his colleagues, but even these seemingly straightforward declarations can harbour potential complexities and conflicts, especially when viewed through the lens of a party that ostensibly prioritises social equity and the welfare of working families. It's like a chef with only 3 ingredients. The skill is in how they're combined and whether the final dish is a wholesome meal or something that leaves a bad taste. Let's consider Mr. Bennett's real property. Is this a single residence or does it involve multiple properties, potentially for investment purposes? For a Labour MP, particularly one who may be involved in discussions around housing policy, the nature and extent of their property ownership is highly relevant. If Mr. Bennett owns several rental properties, how does this align with party efforts to improve housing affordability or strengthen tenant rights? There's an inherent tension if an MP stands to personally gain from high property values or rental incomes while their party is trying to address a housing crisis. It's not impossible to reconcile, but it requires absolute transparency and a clear commitment to prioritising public good over personal gain. Then we have his retirement schemes. Again, the key question is, what are these schemes invested in? Are they vanilla KiwiSaver funds or more complex arrangements? Do these investments align with Labour's values? For example, are they steered clear of industries with poor environmental records or questionable labor practices, or are they simply chasing the highest return, regardless of the ethical implications of the underlying assets? The public has a right to expect that an MP, especially one from Labour, isn't inadvertently profiting from activities that their own party might condemn or seek to regulate. It's about ensuring their nest egg isn't, well, ethically scrambled. And the debts owed. Who are Mr. Bennett's creditors? Are these standard mortgages from reputable banks, or are there loans from private individuals, companies, or less conventional financial institutions? The source of debt can be a significant factor in assessing potential influence. If an MP owes a substantial amount to an entity that has a vested interest in particular government policies, say a large development company or a financial services firm, it could create a dynamic where the MP feels pressured, consciously or unconsciously, to act in a way that benefits their creditor. It's like having your bank manager also be the judge in your court case. You'd hope for impartiality, but you'd be understandably nervous. Even with a shorter list of declared interests, the potential for conflicts for Mr. Bennett exists. The core principle is that public office should not be used for private enrichment, and that MPs of private financial affairs should not compromise their ability to make impartial decisions in the public interest. For a Labour MP, this means demonstrating a commitment to the values of fairness and social responsibility, not just in their political rhetoric, but also in their personal financial conduct. Every property owned, every investment made, and every debt incurred should be able to withstand public scrutiny and affirm that their primary loyalty is to their constituents and the country, not their bank balance. Now let's cast our eyes towards Dan Bidois, the National MP for Northcote. His declared interests are real property, retirement schemes, and debts owed. Northcote, on Auckland's North Shore, is an area that has seen significant property value increases and development pressures. For an MP representing such an electorate, particularly from the National Party, which often champions property rights and development, these declarations carry specific weight. It's like being the mayor of a gold rush town while also owning the biggest gold pan emporium. Your enthusiasm for more prospecting might be seen in a particular light. Mr. Bidois' real property is a key area of interest. Given he represents Northcote, does he own property there? Is it his primary residence, or does he have investment properties in the electorate or elsewhere in Auckland's heated market? His stance on housing policy, infrastructure development in Northcote, like new transport links or amenities, and zoning regulations could all be perceived through the prism of his personal property holdings. If he stands to gain significantly from rising property values spurred by policies he supports or influences, the public needs to be aware of this potential conflict. It's not about saying he can't own property, it's about understanding how those assets might intersect with his public duties. Next, his retirement schemes. As with all MPs, the question is what these schemes are comprised of. Are they invested in ways that might conflict with the interests of his Northcote constituents or broader national policy? For example, if his retirement funds have significant holdings in large development companies or financial institutions that benefit from particular types of urban growth or lending practices, this could be relevant. The National Party often advocates for policies that encourage investment and development. It's important to ensure an MP's personal retirement strategy isn't unduly influencing their advocacy for such policies, especially if those policies have downsides for some of their constituents. And then debts owed. Who holds Mr. Bidois' mortgages or other loans? Are they mainstream banks, or are there private lenders or institutions with specific interests in the Auckland property market or wider economy? If an MP has significant debts to entities that could be affected by government decisions, for instance, a large property development financier, it creates a potential vulnerability. The concern is always whether such debts could subtly or overtly influence an MP's judgment or make them more receptive to the arguments of their creditors when policy is being formulated. It's about ensuring financial obligations don't become political ones. For an MP like Dan Bidois, representing a dynamic and often contentious property market like Northcote, transparency about these financial interests is crucial. His constituents deserve to know that his advocacy for local issues and his contributions to national policy are driven by a genuine assessment of the public good, not by the potential for personal financial benefit through his property or investments. It's about maintaining that delicate balance between being a representative, the community, and a property owner, the community, ensuring the former always takes precedence. Otherwise, it's like asking a fox to design the security for the henhouse. He might have some very specific ideas. Finally, we arrive at the Honourable Chris Bishop, National MP for Hutt South, and a prominent figure often seen as a minister-in-waiting or holding significant portfolios. His declared interests are real property, retirement schemes, debts owed, and gifts. Given his high profile and potential influence, these declarations warrant particularly close scrutiny. When you're in a position to make big decisions, your own financial landscape needs to be as clean as a freshly Windexed beehive window, or at least we hope it is. Let's start with Mr. Bishop's real property. Representing Hutt South, an area with its own housing challenges and development opportunities, the nature and extent of his property holdings are significant. Does he own multiple properties? Are they in his electorate, or are they investment properties elsewhere? As a senior national MP likely to be involved in shaping economic and housing policy, any perception that his personal property portfolio could benefit from the policies he espouses would be problematic. It's about ensuring that when he talks about, say, fast-tracking consents or land use reform, it's for the benefit of New Zealanders broadly, not just to boost the value of Bishop Estates Limited. I made that last bit up, but you get the idea. His retirement schemes also come under the microscope. Given his seniority, are these substantial? And more importantly, where are they invested? Are they in broad index funds, or are there more specific investments in sectors that the National Party might seek to deregulate or promote? For instance, investments in infrastructure funds, private equity, or companies that stand to gain from specific government policies could all raise questions if Mr. Bishop is in a position to influence those policies. It's the classic "is your nest egg benefiting from the eggs you're helping to hatch" in Parliament scenario. The debts owed are another critical piece of the puzzle. Who are Mr. Bishop's creditors? Are they standard banking institutions, or are there private loans or arrangements with entities that might have an interest in currying favour or influencing policy? For a senior MP, particularly one who might hold an economic or finance portfolio, any significant indebtedness to non-standard lenders could be a serious vulnerability, or, at the very least, create a perception of one. It's about ensuring that financial obligations don't translate into political IOUs. And then the gifts. As with Miss Bellich, the declaration of gifts by a senior MP like Mr. Bishop immediately raises questions. What were these gifts? Who were they from? And what was their context and value? Senior MPs are often targets for lobbyists and organisations seeking influence. While strict rules govern the acceptance of gifts, the public needs full transparency to be assured that these are not attempts to sway decision-making or gain privileged access. A gift to a powerful politician is rarely just a gift. It's often an investment by the giver. We need to know if Mr. Bishop is a wise recipient or a walking, talking Trojan horse of undeclared influence. The integrity of his decision-making depends on it. Well, there you have it. A whirlwind tour through the declared financial interests of just a handful of our esteemed members of Parliament. As we can see, the financial interests of our Parliament members are diverse and complex. From property portfolios that could rival a small nation's GDP, I might be exaggerating, but only slightly, to webs of company directorships and trusts so intricate they'd make a spider blush. It's clear that our MPs are often juggling significant private wealth alongside their public duties. And that, in itself, isn't inherently a crime, but it does mean we, the public, need to be more awake than a caffeinated owl during a mating season. The potential for conflicts of interest, or even just the of conflict, is ever present. When an MP who owns multiple rental properties votes on tenancy laws, or an MP with shares in an energy company debates climate change policy, it's not unreasonable to ask whose interests are truly being served. It's crucial to keep an eye on these interests to ensure transparency and accountability. This isn't about being cynical, it's about being responsible citizens. It's about demanding that the people we entrust with power are making decisions for the collective good, not to line their own pockets or feather their already comfortable nests. So what's the takeaway? Stay curious, stay critical, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. These declarations are public for a reason, and it's up to all of us to ensure they mean something more than just words on a page. The health of our democracy depends on it. Thank you for watching, and stay informed. And maybe, just maybe, check your own MP's register of interests. You might be surprised or horrified, or perhaps just mildly disappointed. Either way, knowledge is power.